Hey, good morning, everyone. It's Rob Foglia and Jessica Klein with Foglia Properties here in Nashville with Keller Williams. And we wanted to come to you live today to basically discuss what proper pricing means with a home. Like, basically, what does pricing a home to sell actually mean? I think a lot of times as a homeowner and as a former home seller and someone who works with a lot of homeowners and people who sell their homes, it's a concept that maybe sometimes gets a little bit confusing, I guess we could say. And so we wanted to basically come to y'all today in case you're thinking about making a move this year, even with everything that's happening. This way, you know basically what things are basically what all this means. Does that sound good, Jessica?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right, cool. Well, let's jump in. Basically, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at basically what does it mean when a home is priced right, and what does it mean when it's not? How does that affect things, etc. And what we're looking at right here is I've just pulled up just very normal statistics for what homes that are active, meaning they're out there for sale, they're not under contract yet, and then a couple of rows of what we call under contract. So meaning if you drove past it, it'd probably still have the sign in the yard, and yet at the same time, it's no longer actually available to be seen because it's or not available for purchase, I guess you could say, because another buyer's already claimed it. And the reason I wanted to pull these up instead of like closed properties or anything like that is that some of these under contract homes, these were listed yesterday or the day before or the day before that, and they literally, some of them have gone under contract that quickly. And so
And that's what
basically,
everybody wants, right? When you're selling your home, the ideal for almost everybody is, put it on the market, I do a couple days of showings, and then we're under contract and, headed toward closing.
yeah.
And what we're talking about today is, how do we make that happen versus waiting 2 months and having a trickle of showings throughout the whole thing.
Well, and let me add to what you just said, Jessica, because I think most people's ideal is a combination of that and making sure they get top price for their home.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
when it comes down to it, some people will look at it and go, well, if I'm this person right here, where it was the minimum 0 days on the market, meaning it was listed and that very same day they got an offer and they accepted it. If they're that person, they may be thinking, well, did I leave money on the table?
Right.
Did I lose money? Could I have sold it for more? And so, and those questions are normal. I mean, I think we've all been there, whether it's we sold something on eBay or we sold an old car of ours or something. And, we have those second thoughts afterward, like, man, did I ask too little for that old car that I sold or something? And so I think we've all been there in some form or fashion. And, basically the reason we want to share this stuff with y'all today is especially in this price point that we've got pulled up. And so what I've got pulled up here is under 350 in Davidson County. So very much kind of like the median sales price of Middle Tennessee here and below, which is very much if you've seen any of our other videos, it's a very strong seller's market in those price points. And the reason we want to share is just kind of the biggest difference that I'm seeing. Most of these homes that are active, so, and you can see the way that these are split up. I mean, there's roughly 1,300 homes here between all three of these rows. The actives, the under contract showings, and the under contract not showings. About 1,300 homes here. Of those 1,300, about a third, 400 they're active. About a third are here, and about a little more than a third are right here. And so, point being, the reason I'm sharing this is about a third of the homes, the average time that they've been sitting on the market is almost 2 months. It's 47 days on the market. And it's funny because, Jessica, I don't know about you, like we've talked about this though on a lot of these videos, is how many of our colleagues are just like, oh, the market's hot, the market's hot, the market's hot. And it is. I mean, we were talking about a listing of ours earlier today that we've got probably a dozen showings here the first day that we're showing already. And
Yeah, we actually had to like push them to the next day. Like it's an
yeah.
overwhelming number of showings. Yeah.
Yeah, because with everything that's happening with COVID, we don't want to
Mhm.
overlap showings and all that. We want to be respectful of everybody's health and safety. And because of that, we put a time limit on offers and said, hey, let's go through the end of the weekend to accept all offers, et cetera, to help get our sellers the top price. And that's a big reason why we wanted to share this stuff with y'all, because unfortunately, these 413 active homes, and don't get me wrong, some of these just hit the market today too. So it's not every single active home that I'm gonna, from what I'm about to say, And yet when I see an average that says on average they've been out here for about a month and a half, it tells me a
Mhm.
lot of these 413 homes are overpriced,
Yes.
especially when these under contracts. I mean, I almost like to look at median too for when we're looking at some of this stuff. So maybe even just say 20 days on the market, 3 weeks. So I know you may be like 20 days, that's not bad until you see what's actually under contract. The median here and the median here is 7 days and
Yep.
4 days.
Mhm.
I mean, so it's over 3 times the amount of time right here,
Yeah.
and but what we basically want to get the point across is that proper pricing. These third of these homes, this third of these homes, basically 2/3 of the homes that are out there that have a sign in their yard in Davidson County that are under 350. If they were priced right, they're under contract. They're
Yep.
going quickly. And if it's handled the right way, just like we were talking about before, in terms of being able to put a time limit on offers, to not just let one buyer come in and say, hey, here's a strong offer, accept it. Let's put a time limit on offers. It allows everybody to get through the door, everybody to actually see the home was interested, and yet not drag out the process, which, I mean, just think about supply and demand, Jessica. If we increase demand on anything, real estate, I mentioned cars before, you have multiple people wanting to buy a car you're selling, what's going to happen to the price? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it
going
gets
to go
driven
up.
up. I mean, that's why auctions are such a fun and maybe bad idea. You get caught up in the moment, and you're looking to beat somebody rather than, deciding what you think something is worth.
Exactly. No, absolutely. And so, I just think this stuff is so important because the question or the concern I get probably more than anything from most sellers that I talk to that hear this type of a technique where they hear, well, what if I do underprice my home? What if by putting it, because like for instance, the listing, actually I have it pulled up right here, the 3D tour. So if anybody's interested, a great home in Smyrna right here that we just listed at 269.9, and it was something that there's nothing else out there for sale, and yet we didn't price it above anything else that had sold recently. Instead, we priced it right where everything else had been selling recently, and because of that, we've got all this interest, and we've got so many people interested. That I would expect multiple offers here over the next couple of days, which is going to help drive the price up. Anyway, where was I going with that, Jessica? Sorry, I got squirreled. I got squirreled there. Where was I going with it?
Well, I'm not sure exactly where you were going with that, but I was thinking earlier, you were looking at the stats and showing, the average and median days on market for each status. And I was thinking about what a lot of agents are taught, and I mean, we even talk about it too. There is no problem that can't be solved by pricing a property correctly. And
Hmm.
that doesn't mean underpricing, and that doesn't mean picking the exact price that it's going to sell at. It's 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 a strategy thing, and it's really understanding the comps, and some people might look at those days on market and say, well, maybe the ones that are sitting longer are not in great shape, or maybe they're in less desirable areas, and really that has very little to do with it, because again, there is no problem that can't be solved by the correct pricing.
Well said. Definitely well said. Hoping this loads for us. This is the system that we normally show y'all, where we get to kind of go through some of our trends and things along those lines. And what I'm pulling up right now is the percentage of list price in Davidson County that homes are getting. And so, because unfortunately the stats that I had pulled up a moment ago, I've still got them pulled up right here. These are under contract. We don't know what these sold for until they close. And so it's hard for us to go back and say, all right, well, these 394 homes, these 519 homes right here, did they get higher than asking price? Did they get asking price? Did they still sell for 5% less, which is probably the biggest fear that most sellers have when they put a home on the market and it ends up, kind of, I don't say sitting, but we're not sitting, but it sells like that. They put a home on the market, it sells like that, and they think, well, what if I get an offer for $5,000 under what we're asking and I'm
Yeah.
already underpriced? Well, I'm not happy with the number, etc.
Yep.
Here it is. So since it loaded in Davidson County, the average is what we've seen. Excuse me, the median percentage of list price is 100% of what was from last month, which is crazy. This is
Yeah,
the rolling
very
12 month.
unusual.
Let's go here, still 100%. And so it's basically what I'm seeing, and what this means to me, just as a real estate professional, is that if you're shopping for a home, expect to pay what somebody's asking most of the time. And then if we're selling a home, if we price it right, at the worst, we're going to be looking at that price.
Right.
You
Well,
know?
and I can tell, actually just looked at our numbers up for this year. I can tell you for our listings that we're getting closer to 102.
Thank you for pulling that up, because that is always to me, it's a differentiator, especially in this market. Because if you think about it, when I see a number like this, if I'm a homeowner, if I'm a seller, I'm thinking, well, if this is the case, why does it even matter who we hire? But just because it's 100%, that doesn't mean that that's the max. That, again, that's
Yeah.
the median. So that
Yep.
means for every home that was selling, and obviously there's not a huge difference right here, but 98.5% or so down here, there's another home that's selling up here for 101, 102%. And it does matter who you hire. It
It
definitely
really
does.
does. Yep.
You know, I'll give you another example, and not to talk ill of another agent, so I won't give the name by any means. However, we've got a client that we wrote an offer for earlier in the week, and we showed that I was one of the first people to show this particular listing. Great home out in Bellevue, and we wrote an offer that afternoon. All the agent's response was, well, I'm going to need 24 hours. Okay, cool. That's fine. That's understandable. That's the case for most sellers. They need 24 hours to
Mhm.
respond. So we write the offer, we get it to him. 24 hours goes by, and this guy, doesn't respond at all. So I'm reaching out to him. Hey, where are we at? Where are we at? He goes, oh, we have multiple offers. You're not going to get the home at that price. And I'm like, okay, well, why don't you tell me you have multiple offers, and let's see
Right.
if we can, get your client the best price possible. Because
Mhm.
ultimately, and on top of that, not to obviously I'm not giving an address or an agent name, so only Jessica knows who I'm talking about here. It's just, this person, if he had actually put a timeline on it from the start, that's when I as a buyer's agent could have coached that buyer and said, well, hey, if you really do love this home, you're not going to be able to get it for X. You're going to have to go a little bit higher than this. And instead of trying to just fly by the seat of my pants saying, oh, I've got an hour to get an updated offer to this guy, what are we doing here? Does that make sense? I don't feel like I'm rambling here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes perfect sense, and it makes sense from the buyer's side and from the buyer's perspective and from the seller's perspective. And I'm thinking about, again, that property that we were talking about in Smyrna, and we put that offer deadline out to incentivize people and to make sure that people know, like, okay, so now we have time to really prepare our best offer. And then, and I doubt that that's the only time we're going to tell people, like, hey, make sure that this is your best one because this is the situation. And that's how we're getting, that 102%. We're pricing it right from the beginning. We're being very communicative with all the other agents involved, and then everyone has a fair chance and is putting their best foot forward.
Exactly, because there's more to an offer, just like we always coach our buyers about. Since we're mostly talking about home sellers when it comes to today's conversation, there's more to an offer than just the number, than just the price. It really comes down to what you're going to make from at the end of the day from the sale, what you're going to
Yep.
walk away from the sale with. It's not just about the actual sales price. Are there closing costs? How long is this contract for? Are there my
Like,
dog's
when are
trying
we
to say
going to
hi.
close? What title company are you using? Is it going
Yeah,
to appraise, right? Like, is,
exactly. Is it going to appraise? Is it what contingencies are there? Is
yep,
there a sale of home contingency? Is there a financing contingency? Things like that, because
yeah.
all those things are going to affect the a buyer's ability to close is what I'm getting at, and that's going to affect how much a seller is ultimately going to make from the sale. And top representation is going to allow you to see that, get this stuff. And unfortunately, for that home seller that was on the other side of the buyer example that I was giving y'all earlier, unfortunately, I don't know if they got that. That just is what it is.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well,
Um,
and maybe can we talk a little bit about what goes into pricing a property correctly? Because we can talk all day about doing it, but what sort of things do we look at when we're pricing a property?
Yeah, well, great question. So, well, for instance, this one right here, and unfortunately, I don't have the comps pulled right now. I should have pulled them ahead of time. But like this one right here that we've got in Smyrna. So when we listed this home, or when we knew that this listing was coming right here, we basically went out and I go through and I run when I say pull the comps, I'm going through and searching in our MLS for what else is in the neighborhood that's sold recently or that's maybe under contract as well. In fact, I love the under contract comps the best. If it's under contract, then I know that that's what's happening in today's market, and that's what's getting the results in today's market. And so, point being, that's the biggest thing I'm looking for is I'm seeing, well, what's happened, and my mouse is freaking out on me here. So I was just trying to tour the home as I'm talking. Point being, what I'm just getting at with y'all is that I'm looking to see what's under contract, what's sold recently, what's closed recently. And for instance, this one, we're priced at $269,900. There were 4 homes that were within 100 square feet of this home in this neighborhood. And this is a newer home, as y'all can see, as I'm walking around, or as I'm taking y'all through the 3D tour here. You can see this is a newer home, and so it's a newer subdivision. Things along, and so it's a pretty standard home for the most part. What I'm getting at though is I saw 3 other comps that had closed in the last, I think it was 60 days, that were all priced between, I think, 267 and 270, or right in that range. Nothing above 270, nothing below. I think it was 265 and 270. Nothing below 265, nothing above 270. So we knew those were the numbers that we were, that we're likely going to be starting with, in between. And in fact, when I asked the sellers here, I said, well, where do you want to go with? They started to pick a number right in the middle. And, I not to talk them into a higher price, but I said, hey, well, why don't we go with 269.9? That's not going to be the end of the world right there. We're not pushing anybody away, because this home right here is a great home. It's got some nice bamboo floors, as you can see, tile in the bathrooms. I mean, there's some great finishes that'll get that attention that ultimately anybody's going to be looking for on their home that they're selling. Did I answer the question, Jessica? I feel like I rambled here for a minute.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that definitely answers it. And something that you touched on a little bit is, it's not just comparing the size and the price. Finishes are very important. And so like this house has nice neutral colors. It has hard floors, which are popular. There are a lot of things that give this home really good curb appeal. And not every house has all of those details, and some houses have even more. And it's really important to adjust for those kinds of things from a buyer's perspective, because sometimes the seller will put a lot of work into something, and there's a lot of emotional value put on that. And it's really helpful to have someone who works with buyers day to day and says, hey, no, like these things are really what helps something to sell, and what drives interest in a property and brings real value. And these are the things that don't. And we can even make some of those adjustments on the front end.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up, Jessica, because it's not just pulling comps and saying, well, this sold this at this price. All right, so there you go. And just to give you an example here, just looking in the kitchen, I mean, they've got it looks like a nice stainless fridge. They've got great bamboo floors downstairs. I mean, nice hardwood floors. Like these aren't just a cheap laminate or carpet that needs to be replaced. I mean, and like you said, there's some nice fixtures in here as well. I mean, these countertops have been replaced in a newer home. And so there's some nice finishes. Those things, though, unfortunately, when we're seeing that price range. So again, I gave that price range before for this neighborhood, that 265 to 270 price range that we would expect to see a home listed. So if you're a consumer, you'd expect to see this home in that price range.
Yep.
If we had looked at this and said, all right, well, there's bamboo floors, there's upgraded countertops, they've got tile in the bathrooms, et cetera, new paint, all the nice updates that we're talking about here, the selling features that you just mentioned. If we took that into consideration and said, all right, well, let's go 280.
Right.
We're expecting 265 to 270. Let's go 280.
Yeah, because that gut feeling is it's a great house.
Yeah, exactly. If you what's the old acronym for gut? Gave up thinking, right?
Yeah.
And go with that gut feeling, and instead of saying, all right, well, these are what the numbers dictate, and this is what the market's expecting. If you just went with that gut feeling, unfortunately, what will probably have happened is instead of seeing what we have today, I think about a dozen showings somewhere in there on this home, and then I wouldn't be surprised if we ended this weekend somewhere between 25 and 30 showings on this property, and knock on wood, we're going to have a handful of offers that'll help drive the price up from 269.9. Whereas if we were at, say, 279.9, I would guess we probably have no more than 4 or 5 showings, probably about a sixth of the interest that we're going to end up having on this home, and maybe get one offer. And if we get the offer, it's probably going to be closer to 270. And so, yeah, you may think, all right, this, just to jump back to this, you may think, okay, well, there's the 100%. That's what I would have thought compared to market value. Where in reality, we're going to be able to help drive the wrong one here. We're going to be able to help drive the price up. Is my point.
Right.
And so, anyway, I hope that answers that question. I think you said you may have had one or two other questions though, or did you? Was that it?
No, I mean, I think that's good. We touched on appraisals a little bit. Sometimes that's an important thing to talk about. I don't know
Yeah.
if you have
Well,
any good points to bring up about that.
yeah, great question and great topic, because ultimately when we're in a market that's been appreciating, and like we saw this a lot in like 2017, 2016, 2017, where we have appraisal issues. We would get multiple offers. In fact, I'm thinking right now of a small little townhome in the Priest Lake area that I sold. I think it was the end of 17, maybe somewhere right in there. It was either end of 16 to 17. I remember it was like December. And they did some great renovation to it. It was like the only townhome in that neighborhood that had an extra full bath. It was a great townhome. And the problem, and like we even had multiple offers at the price that we were at, and because we priced it right, and got, I think, 10 grand more than asking price. Long story short, what I'm getting at is we ran into an appraisal issue because there was nothing else that had sold for that price.
Hmm.
And if for instance with this, just to take it back to what we're talking about with this home in today's market, if we had, say, overpriced this home and we were at 279.9 and we got one offer, just say, and it was even 279.9, say we got what we were asking, or 275. Again, 275 is above market value based on what we're seeing. And say we had gotten 275 instead of 279.9, or instead of 270. Well, if that's the case, if that's the only offer we have and an appraiser is looking at it and they go, well, all these are selling for 270, what makes yours special? Well, they've got granite countertops. Yeah, you've got some nice countertops, but they've got granite too. You've got bamboo floors, but they've got some nice hardwoods too. All of a sudden, that's when the appraiser comes back and says, well, your home's worth 270. You're out $5,000, Mr. and Mrs. Seller.
Right.
Whereas if we can go to the appraiser and say, well, in one weekend we had 35 showings and 7 offers, and
They were all right there.
yeah, and we had four of those 7 offers were in this price range. While they can't necessarily use those as past sales, it is going to influence them to make the right decision with the home, and
Right.
and to make them go that extra mile to not go back and say, all right, well, no, this home's only worth 270, even though you had 5 offers at 275. Your home's only worth 270. So that does help build that in a little bit of extra cushion too.
Yeah. Oh, and the important thing, I mean, I don't know if everybody's aware of how appraisals factor into a sale. Appraisals, you get an appraiser, well, the lender sends out an appraiser to figure out what the value of a home is, in case for some reason, down the line, the buyer gets this loan and then they default on it, and then the bank has to sell the property later. They want to make sure they get their investment back. And so if something appraises too high, or sorry, if an appraisal comes back low, so like in the case you were talking about, that $5,000, then we can't move forward with that loan. And it's likely that the buyer won't be able to get the house. So, I mean, there are things we can do, like decreasing the sale price or some other negotiation like that. The buyer can bring the $5,000 out of pocket. There are things that can be done, but that is a very big wrench in a transaction if the appraisal comes back low.
Well, and ultimately what ends up happening most of the time, if the appraisal does come back low, unfortunately, a lot of the times the seller ends up eating it, especially in a situation where it's a price range, something like this, in the 270, 300, 350 range. A lot of those buyers are owner occupant buyers. They may be putting 5%, 10% down. Just take this example: a $270,000 home. 5% of that's what, 14,000, somewhere in there. And so if they're putting $14,000 down for their down payment, and the home came back 5 grand lower than it needed to on the appraisal, they may not have that extra $5,000 to put toward a down payment. If they're a first-time buyer, they may not have a huge down payment that they can then say, oh, well, what's another $5,000? We love this home, let's do it. They
Mm-hmm.
may be in a spot where they're having to, walk away to find another home unless the seller comes down. And in that instance, a lot of sellers, I've just learned over the years, will say, well, we don't want to go back through the hassle of showing. We've already packed, we've maybe already moved. And if that's the
Yeah.
case, then they may just say, all right, $5,000, let's just eat it. And again, that's why it matters the way that you conduct business. That's why it matters when you price the home right, because if it's overpriced, even if you find that buyer, you could run into issues just like Jessica's saying. Or I've even seen a lot of times, if you find that buyer, they may then try to beat you up later on during the home inspection, because they're like, well,
Yeah.
I paid so much for this home already, so I want everything fixed. And it's just, some of that stuff's going to happen. And
Yeah.
when we price it right, and we find that buyer, so many times that buyer is so grateful to getting the home. They've fallen in love with the home. They feel like they won by having their offer get accepted,
Yep.
that that it's a little smoother.
100%.
So I know it's been a long one. I think we're up close to 30 minutes, so we may want to cut it off soon, unless there was something else that I'm missing that you wanted to bring up here.
No, I mean, I think that this has been a really good discussion. I mean, I could probably talk all day about about this. It's just such an important part of the process, and I think it's an important conversation for people to, be involved with and to understand.
Well, and I agree with you on that, Jessica. It is such an important part, because it does help, I think, both our sellers and our buyers that are out there, because our sellers, they, like we talked about at the very beginning, sometimes can get in their own head and say, well, our home is worth X, when the market tells us, just to jump back to here, if your home's worth X and we hit the market, we should be getting X within 4 days or 7 days.
Yeah.
And if we don't, then your home's probably not worth X, unfortunately, whatever X ends up actually being. And so it's important then that we go through and we have that price correct. So that, because ultimately, and this is something that's always stuck out with me. I was in one of for my KW friends out there, one of my favorite classes, Bold. And one of my favorite Bold coaches, he had given us basically a script that was, or like a conversation to have with people, and to ask the question, well, when do you think your home is worth the most? So Jessica, I'll ask you this. Pretend you're a home seller. When do you think your home is worth the most amount of money?
When do I think? Like, you mean at what point in the sales process, or ever?
Yeah, what point in the sales process?
Well, I would say at the beginning, right? First day on the market.
Exactly right. The first day
Yeah.
on the market, the very beginning. And why I think that is probably because most buyers are going to be so excited about the home, especially in a market that we're in right now, where there's limited inventory. Now, when do you think it's worth the second most?
Second day on the market.
Exactly. And the last question, what do you think the third most?
Probably third day.
Exactly. And we could obviously keep going with that conversation. And yet the reason I bring that up is that sorry, I keep going to the wrong screen. So like, for instance, these right here, they were able to get, like, especially because, again, this is the median. So there were plenty of homes that pended first day, second day, third day. They likely got top market price.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, these right here that have been sitting 47 days or longer, unfortunately, they've kind of missed that market and missed the mark on the price. And that's why, again, pricing it right is just so important. And from the, just from the consumer perspective, it may make sense that we have a conversation on this home again next week, because by next week, knock on wood, we're under contract.
Yeah, I'm knocking over here.
and so, with that being the case, it may make sense next Friday that we go through, or even just maybe even middle of next week after we're pending, that we go through and just talk about, maybe at that point, I'll bring up the comps. We can't disclose what we're pending for, of course, at that point, and yet we can tell you if it's above asking price, and we can bring up the comps. So that way everybody can see, hey, this stuff worked. And that way, it's not just hearsay. It's not just, I'm sure you know what I'm getting at. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I know I enjoyed having this conversation.
Well, good. I did too. Well, awesome. Anything else before we let everybody go?
No, I think that's it. Just, fingers crossed for this property.
Well, absolutely. Well, if y'all need anything, if you want to know what proper pricing would be for your home, PM us, email us, give us a call. You can PM me directly here on Facebook if you'd like, or at Foglia Properties on Facebook. You can email us, info@foliaproperties.com. You can call me or text me, 615-591-5665. We're here to help, even if you're just kind of curious based on the fact that you keep hearing there's limited inventory, or there's just, the housing market's going crazy. I mean, it's which it is. I mean, it's ridiculous how quickly some things are going right now. And if you're just curious, so you can start making the best decisions for your family. Again, we're here to educate. We're here to inform. And that's the whole point of these videos. So if you've got a question, give me a shout and give us a call. We're happy to help.
Yep. Sounds good. See you guys next week.
All right. Thanks, y'all.